Hey guys, time for lunch. We're on Esther chapter 8. On that day, sovereign Ahasuerus came to sovereigness Esther, the house of Haman, the adversary of the Yahudim, and Mordecai came before the sovereign, for Esther had explained what he was to her. And the sovereign took off his signet ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai over the house of Haman. And Esther spoke to the sovereign again, and fell down at his feet, and begged him with tears to put an end to the evil of Haman the Agagite, and his plot which he had plotted against the Yahudim. And the sovereign held out the golden scepter toward Esther, and Esther arose and stood before the sovereign, and said, If it pleases the sovereign, and if I have found favor in his sight, and the matter is right before the sovereign, and I am pleasing in his eyes, let it be written to bring back the letters, the plot by Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, which he wrote to destroy the Yahudim, who are in all the sovereign's provinces. For how could I bear to see the evil coming to my people? Or how could I bear to see the destruction of my relatives? And sovereign Ahasuerus said to sovereigness Esther and Mordecai the Yahudi, Look, I have given Esther the house of Haman, and they have hanged him on the wooden structure, because he laid his hand on the Yahudim. Now, you write on behalf of the Yahudim as it pleases you, in the sovereign's name, and seal it with the sovereign's signet ring. For a letter which is written in the sovereign's name and sealed with the sovereign's signet ring, no one turns back. So the sovereign's scribes were called at that time, in the 3rd new moon, which is the new moon of Sivan, on the 23rd day, and it was written according to all that Mordecai commanded to the Yahudim, and to the viceroys, and the governors, and the princes of the provinces from India to Cush. 127 provinces, to every province in its own writing, to every people in their own language, and to the Yahudim in their own writing and in their own language. And he wrote in the name of the sovereign Ahasuerus, and sealed it with the sovereign's signet ring, and sent letters by runners on horseback, riding on royal horses bred from speedy mares. And the sovereign has granted to the Yahudim, who are in every city, to be assembled and stand for their lives, to cut off, to kill, and to destroy all the power of the people or province that would distress them, little children and women, and to plunder their possessions. On one day in all the provinces of the day of sovereign Ahasuerus, on the 13th day of the 12th new moon, which is the new moon of Adar, the copy of the writing to be made law in every province was announced to all the peoples, so that the Yahudim would be ready on that day to be avenged on their enemies. The runners riding on royal horses went out, hastened, and pressed on by the sovereign's command. And the decree was given out in the citadel of Shushan. And Mordecai went out from the presence of the sovereign, wearing royal garments of blue and white, with a great crown of gold and a garment of fine linen and purple. And the city of Shushan rejoiced and was glad. For the Yahudim there was light, and gladness, and joy, and value. And in every province and in every city where the sovereign's command and decree came, the Yahudim had joy and gladness, a feast and a good day. And many of the people of the land were becoming Yahudim, for the fear of the Yahudim had fallen upon them. And in the 12th new moon, that is, the new moon of Adar, on the 13th day, when the sovereign's command and his decree came to be done, on the day that the enemies of the Yahudim had waited to overpower them, it turned around, so that the Yehudim overpowered those who hated them. The Yehudim assembled in their cities throughout all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus to lay hands on those who sought their evil. And no one stood against them, because fear of them fell upon all people. And all the officials of the provinces, and the viceroys, and the governors, and all those doing the sovereign's work, helped the Yehudim, because the fear of Mordecai fell upon them. For Mordecai was great in the places of the sovereign, and his report spread into the provinces. For this man Mordecai became greater and greater. And the Yehudim struck all their enemies with the stroke of the sword, with killing and destruction, and did what they pleased to those who hated them. And in the citadel of Shushan, the Yehudim killed and destroyed 500 men. In Parshandatha, and Dalphon, and Aspatha, and Poratha, and Adalia, and Aridatha, and Parmashatha, and Arisai, and Ariadai, and Yaizatha, the 10 sons of Haman, son of Hamadatha, the enemy of the Yehudim, they killed, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. On that day the number of those who were killed in the citadel of Shushan came before the sovereign. And the sovereign said to the sovereigness Ester, the Yehudim have killed and destroyed 500 men in the citadel of Shushan, and the 10 sons of Haman. What have they done in the rest of the sovereign's provinces? And what is your petition? And it is given to you. And what is your further request? And it is done. And Ester said, if it pleases the sovereign, let it be given to the Yehudim who are in Shushan to do again tomorrow, according to today's decree. And let Haman's 10 sons be hanged on the wooden structure. And the sovereign commanded this to be done, and the decree was given in Shushan, and they hanged Haman's 10 sons. And the Yehudim who were in Shushan also assembled on the 14th day of the new moon of Adar, and they killed 300 men at Shushan, but they did not lay a hand on the plunder. And the rest of the Yehudim in the sovereign's provinces assembled and stood for their lives, and to get rest from their enemies, and to kill 75,000 of their enemies, and they did not lay a hand on the plunder. That was on the 13th day of the new moon of Adar, and on the 14th they rested in it, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. But the Yehudim who were at Shushan assembled on the 13th day, as well as on the 14th day. And on the 15th they rested in it, and made it a day of feasting and gladness. Therefore the Yehudim of the villages who dwelt in the unwalled towns were making the 14th day of the new moon of Adar a good day of gladness and feasting, and for sending portions to one another. And Mordecai wrote these matters, and sent letters to all the Yehudim, who were in all the provinces of sovereign Ahasuerus, both near and far, and established among them to perform the 14th and 15th days of the new moon of Adar yearly, as the days on which the Yehudim had rest from their enemies, as the new moon, which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, and from mourning to a good day, that they should make them days of feasting and joy, of sending portions to one another and gifts to the poor. And the Yehudim undertook to do as they had begun, and as Mordecai had written to them. Because Haman, son of Hamadatha the Agagite, the adversary of the Yehudim, had plotted against the Yehudim to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is, the lot, to crush them and to destroy them. But when she came before the sovereign, he commanded by a letter that his evil plot which Haman had plotted against the Yehudim should return on his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the wooden structure. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur. Therefore, because of all the words of this letter which they had seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them. The Yehudim established and imposed it upon themselves and upon their seed and all who should join them, that without fail they should perform these 2 days every year according to their writing and at their appointed time, and that these days should be remembered and performed throughout every generation, every clan, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim should not fail from among the Yehudim, and that the remembrance of them should not cease from their seed. And sovereigness Esther, the daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Yehudi, wrote with all authority to confirm this second letter about Purim. And Mordecai sent letters to all the Yehudim, to the 127 provinces of the reign of Ahasuerus, words of peace and truth, to establish these days of Purim at these appointed times, as Mordecai the Yehudi and sovereigness Esther had established for them, and as they had established for themselves and their seed concerning matters of their fasting and lamenting. And the decree of Esther established these matters of Purim, and it was written in the book. And sovereign Ahasuerus laid compulsory labor on the land and the islands of the sea, and all the acts of his power and his might, and the exact account of the greatness of Mordecai, with which the sovereign made him great, are they not written in the book of the annals of the sovereigns of Media and Persia? For Mordecai the Yehudi was second to sovereign Ahasuerus, and great among the Yehudim, and pleasing to many brothers, seeking the good of his people, and speaking peace to all his seed.